Have you ever stopped to think about what life might look like when the people you love are no longer around? As we grow older, the prospect of loneliness becomes more than just a fleeting thought. It evolves into a reality that we all must inevitably face. In today's video, we'll delve deep into the emotional journey of aging, the challenge of loneliness, and the transformative power of human connection and companionship. You'll hear an inspiring and personal story about how one man, David Thompson, navigates the trials of growing older, dealing with the loss of loved ones, and finding unexpected connections that breathe new life into his days. This is not just about the loneliness that comes with aging. It's about how to embrace and cope with it, how to prepare for the inevitable changes that come with getting older, and how to find meaning and fulfillment during the later years of life. By the end of this video, you'll gain insights on how to better navigate the challenges of aging, the importance of self-sufficiency in maintaining dignity and independence, and how to embrace companionship in a way that works for you. Whether you're looking to redefine your future or simply want to understand the emotional side of aging, David's story will leave you with valuable lessons that could change how you approach your later years. Stay with us until the end, because what you'll discover could fundamentally change the way you view the aging process and help you appreciate what truly matters in this journey of life. Don't miss it. If you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any future videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help spread these valuable lessons by liking and sharing it with others. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0, and let me know how I can improve and create better content for you. Now, let's dive in. Please enjoy. My name is David Thompson, and I'm 62 years old. Before retiring, I worked as a civil servant for more than half my life. However, due to a series of corporate reforms, I was unexpectedly forced into early retirement. Fortunately, over the years, I had diligently saved up enough money, so I wasn't overly concerned about my financial situation. At one point, my home was always filled with the sounds of my family. My son, Ryan, and my daughter, Emily, each leading their own busy lives with their families. But as the years passed, the house became quieter. A few years ago, my wife, Carol, passed away after a lengthy illness, and as time went on, my children became increasingly involved in their own lives. As a result, their visits became less frequent. One evening, I found myself sitting alone on the couch, looking around at the quiet emptiness of my house. A sharp pang of loneliness hit me deep in my chest. Just as I was absorbed in this thought, the phone rang. It was Ryan. His voice sounded rushed as if he were juggling multiple things. "Dad, you're staying home tonight, right? I've got some rest to take, so I might not be able to make it today." Hearing his words made me feel a little lonely, but I understood how much he had on his plate with his own family. I didn't want to burden him, so I responded with a gentle smile in my voice. "Go ahead and take care of yourself, son. I'm okay here, alone." After I hung up, I let out a long, deep sigh. It felt like I had been forgotten, left behind by the world. In the past, my days were filled with work and family, but now, after retiring, losing Carol, and with Ryan and Emily living their own separate lives, my sense of isolation seemed to deepen each day. The next day, a good friend from the neighborhood, Tom, came to visit. He's about my age, and we've known each other for years. Tom asked, "David, are you alone at home now?" I nodded silently, feeling the weight of his words. He sat down beside me, sighed deeply, and said, "Same here. My wife and kids are busy with their lives, so I spend most days alone. It's tough, isn't it?" His words struck a chord in my heart. Once again, I realized that loneliness was something that couldn't be avoided. Tom continued, "We need to think about the future. What are you going to do if you end up all by yourself?" His question felt like a needle piercing my heart. I couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to be left completely alone in this vast, silent house, with no one to talk to, no one to share my thoughts with. The thought of "what will I do if I end up alone?" echoed in my mind for days, like a haunting refrain. A few days later, my daughter Emily came to visit, bringing my young granddaughter along. I had prepared Emily's favorite dishes from when she was a child, hoping for a warm, relaxed visit. However, as soon as she walked in, Emily's voice was hurried. "Dad, I can only stay for a short while today. I need to go pick up Mark in a bit." Seeing the rush in her voice, the sense of sadness and emptiness welled up inside me. I tried to hide it with a smile and said, "It's okay, sweetie. Go on and take care of yourself. I'm fine." Emily ate quickly, gathered her things, and then, with a few reminders, hurried out of the door. Watching her leave, I felt my heart sink. The house, which once echoed with family life, now felt like a hollow shell. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't fall asleep, my mind replaying the events of the day. The question, "What will I do if I'm truly alone?" kept repeating in my thoughts. I quietly whispered to myself, "I can't keep going like this. I need to start preparing for the future." A few days later, I decided to invite Tom for a walk at the nearby park. We sat on a bench, watching the world pass by, and I finally spoke up. "You know, you were right about everything. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. At my age, if I end up truly alone, how will I manage?" Tom nodded solemnly and said, "I've been thinking the same thing. We can't just wait until it's too late to make changes. We have to plan. The first thing we need to consider is money," he continued. "We need to ensure that we have enough to live comfortably, so we're not scrambling when the time comes." I agreed with him completely. Finances are the foundation of a stable life, and without them, aging becomes much more difficult. With that in mind, I began going over my savings again. I wasn't wasteful, but considering the potential for future medical expenses and other inevitable costs, it was clear that careful planning was necessary. Then Tom added, "Another thing is, without a spouse around, our children have their own busy lives. We can't always count on them, so we need to become self-sufficient. It's important to stay active, both physically and socially. Regular exercise, joining clubs, and getting out of the house are key to maintaining our health and well-being." His words struck a chord with me. I had been so focused on my children's lives, thinking of them as my main source of connection, that I'd neglected my quality of life. I found myself spending nearly every day at home, glued to the TV, with little interaction beyond the occasional phone call. If I continued living like this, it was only a matter of time before boredom set in, and with it, a decline in both my physical and emotional health. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment one below to let me know that you are still here with me. Determined to make a change, I promised myself I'd start exercising every morning in the park and visiting the local community center in the evenings. There, I could play chess and have conversations with other older people. It wasn't long before I began making new friends, and my life slowly started to gain some color. But despite the new friendships, loneliness still lingered. Every night, I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind wandering to the future. If I end up all alone, who will be there for me? If I fall ill, who will take care of me? These questions kept me awake, gnawing at my mind. The thought of finding a companion crossed my mind more than once. But I hesitated. Carol had just passed away, and the idea of being with someone else felt like a betrayal to her memory. Still, as the days went by, the loneliness became harder to ignore. It gnawed at me, and eventually, I couldn't bear it anymore. I decided to talk to Tom about how I was feeling. He listened quietly, then nodded understandingly. "I get it," he said. "After my wife passed, I had the same thoughts. For people our age, it's not about finding someone to lean on, but finding someone to share conversations with, someone who can be there when you need them. It's about companionship, not dependence." His words resonated with me. You're right, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. It's not about needing someone to take care of me, it's about finding someone to ease this loneliness. Slowly, my resistance began to fade. I began to open myself up to the idea of companionship again, allowing myself to believe that perhaps it was time to heal the loneliness I had been carrying for so long. One day, at a community gathering, I met an elderly woman named Nancy. She was kind-hearted and lived alone, with her children living far away. From the moment we started talking, there was an instant connection. Nancy was an optimistic person who loved to travel, and her zest for life brought a lightness to my days. We quickly became regular companions, meeting often to chat, take walks, or share meals. Our bond grew over time, and it felt as if we had known each other much longer than we had. We'd go shopping together, cook meals, and spend quiet afternoons watching TV. It was the sort of connection I hadn't known I needed. Though our life together wasn't officially recognized by marriage, it felt very much like the partnership of a married couple, caring for and supporting one another. One day, when I came down with a high fever, Nancy was beside herself with worry. She stayed by my side, helped me take medicine, and even called Ryan, asking him to take me to the hospital. When Ryan rushed over and saw Nancy tending to me so attentively, he looked surprised for a moment, then asked, "Dad, why didn't you call us sooner? If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." I smiled and reassured him. I didn't want to be a burden. You all have your own busy lives. And besides, Nancy is taking such good care of me, so there's no need to worry. Ryan nodded, grateful but still concerned. He insisted I come to stay with him while I recovered, but I refused. My home is the most comfortable place for me, and with Nancy here, I'm well taken care of. Don't worry about me. You all continue with your lives, and I'll be just fine. Ryan gave up, but before he left, he asked Nancy to keep a close eye on my health. I could tell he was still uneasy, but I reassured him once more. When I returned home, lying in bed and watching Nancy busily take care of me, my heart felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. Having someone in your later years, especially when you're alone, is truly a blessing. Our relationship continued to grow deeper. It wasn't the passionate love of youth, but rather a calm, enduring companionship that gave me a sense of security. We looked out for each other's health and provided support, spending quiet and peaceful days together. However, as time passed, some challenges began to surface. One day, Nancy received a call from her son, who told her that she was getting married soon and that she should come live with his family. Hearing this news weighed heavily on me, but I tried to remain composed, replying, "It's wonderful that your son is getting married. Living with family is a good thing." Nancy seemed uncertain, and with a gentle voice she said, "I've gotten used to living here, and I'm not sure I'll be able to help out much if I go back." She looked at me with such sincerity, waiting for reassurance. My heart was torn, but after a long pause, I sighed and said, "Your son needs you. It's a mother's responsibility." I smiled softly, "I'm okay being alone, so please don't worry about me. You should go back." Despite the words I spoke, my heart felt as though it was carrying a heavy burden. After days of deep reflection, Nancy finally decided to return to her son's home. I walked with her to the bus stop and stood there, watching as she boarded the bus. The familiar presence I had grown so accustomed to disappeared, and I was left standing in silence, staring at the space around me. My mind felt numb, and my home once again felt vast and cold. Perhaps this was fate, I thought. I realized I would need to come to terms with the loneliness that comes with aging. After Nancy left, tears welled up in my eyes, and my world seemed to shrink back into the silence of solitude. My life returned to being alone, just as it had been before. Every morning, I would force a smile when looking at my reflection in the mirror. I continued my routine of exercise and speaking with others at the community center, but I couldn't escape the feeling of emptiness that lingered in my heart. Ryan and Emily, my children, would call occasionally, but they each had their own busy families and lives. Frequent visits were impossible. I didn't want to burden them, so I would always tell them I'm okay. But deep down, the loneliness only seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. One afternoon at the community center, I overheard a group of elderly residents discussing nursing homes. Suddenly, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe it was time for me to start planning for my future, making arrangements for what was to come. The very next day, I called Ryan and shared my thoughts with him. He paused for a moment before responding, "Dad, do you want to go into a nursing home? It just sounds so cold." I chuckled softly, trying to lighten the mood, and replied, "It's not about being cold. What I need is a place where I can live comfortably. You're all busy with your own lives, and I can't expect you to always be around. In a nursing home, I can get professional care and be around people my age. It might be better than staying here alone, isolated." Ryan thought about it for a moment before telling me he'd talk it over with Emily. A few days later, Ryan and Emily came over to my house. They both sat down across from me, their faces serious. Emily spoke first, her voice filled with concern. "Dad, we understand that it's tough for you to be by yourself, but do you think a nursing home is the right choice for you? We're worried that you'll feel even more lonely there." Seeing the worry on their faces warmed my heart, but I remained calm and said, "You don't need to worry about me. This is a decision I've made after giving it a lot of thought. I need to find a place where I can live the rest of my years in peace and comfort. I don't think nursing homes are as bad as people make them out to be. Plus, I don't want to be a burden to any of you." Ryan and Emily exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. I could tell they weren't thrilled with my decision, but I knew it was necessary, not only for me but also so they could focus on their own lives without worrying about mine. In the end, Ryan and Emily reluctantly agreed to respect my choice. Ryan said, "If you've thought it through, Dad, we'll support you. But we'll make sure to visit often, so you won't feel lonely." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. A few months after settling into the city nursing home, I began to adjust to my new life. The facility was wonderful, with beautifully landscaped gardens and spacious common areas. The residents were all around my age, and it wasn't long before I started to feel at ease in this new environment. On my first day, I took a walk through the garden, and that's when I met Henry, an elderly resident who greeted me warmly. He gave me a tour of the facility, introducing me to other new residents and helping me get acquainted with the place. That evening, as I lay in bed and gazed out the window at the tranquil night view, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Although I was still getting used to my new home, I no longer felt like I had to face loneliness by myself. I made several new friends, and with them, a renewed sense of purpose emerged in my life. By the time 6 months had passed, I had grown accustomed to my daily routine. I enjoyed regular meals, kept up with my exercise, and spent time with my new friends, playing chess and engaging in conversations. Life had become simpler, but it was quieter and more peaceful. My heart felt at ease compared to the turbulence of my earlier years. Ryan and Emily called often to check in, asking how I was adjusting and if I needed anything. I always reassured them, saying, "Dad's doing just fine. Nothing is missing, so don't worry." But one afternoon, everything changed. After lunch, I was sitting outside in the garden, enjoying the sunlight, when my phone rang. It was Ryan, and his voice trembled with worry. "Dad, it's Misato. She was in a traffic accident. They've taken her into surgery. You need to get to the hospital now." I was in shock, and I nearly dropped the phone. "What happened? Is Misato okay?" I stammered. Ryan's voice was tight with fear. "We don't know yet. We're at the hospital. You need to come." The urgency in his voice sent a jolt through my body. Misato, her name filled my thoughts, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Without hesitation, I asked the nursing home staff to take me to the hospital. As we drove there, I replayed the moments when Misato had left my home, the words I had said to her to take care of herself, never imagining something like this could happen. When I arrived at the hospital, I found Ryan and Emily waiting anxiously in front of the operating room. Ryan led me to a chair and explained, "Dad, the doctors are doing everything they can, but her condition is critical." I stared at the red lights on the operating room doors, praying for her recovery. Misato was always so strong, so full of life, but now my mind was filled with worry. Every passing moment felt like an eternity. Finally, the doors to the surgery room opened, and the doctor stepped out. I rushed toward him, barely able to ask, "How is she?" The doctor's face was grim as he shook his head. "She's sustained severe injuries. Prepare for the worst." Those words hit me like a blow. My legs buckled beneath me, and I could feel the weight of his words draining the strength from my body. Ryan stood beside me, trying to support me, but I felt hollow. Then, the operating room doors opened once more, and a nurse wheeled Misato out on a gurney. Her face was pale, her breath shallow, and she was barely conscious. It was impossible to reconcile this fragile, suffering version of Misato with the vibrant, joyful woman I had known. I held her trembling hand, my shaking with emotion, and whispered, "Misato, hang in there. We promised we'd walk through life together. Don't leave me." She opened her eyes slightly as if hearing me, but her lips moved faintly, as if trying to speak, though no words came out. A single tear slid down her cheek. At that moment, I couldn't hold back anymore. I collapsed beside her, clutching her hand tightly and crying, "Please don't go. What will I do without you?" Emily, standing quietly beside me, was also in tears, but both of us understood that no words could ease the pain of this moment. That night, Misato's condition worsened rapidly. The doctor informed us that she was in critical condition and not expected to survive. I couldn't leave her side, not even for a second, fearing that she might slip away while I wasn't there. Misato, sensing my presence, opened her eyes slowly and reached out with a weak hand, gripping mine. Her hand was cold and lifeless, and I gripped it even tighter, tears falling freely. "Misato, please," I begged softly. "Stay with me." In a barely audible voice, she whispered, "Be happy, David." Then, her hand fell limp, and her eyes closed for the final time. I was overcome with unimaginable sorrow. I held her hand, feeling the weight of her loss, but she was gone. The last person who truly cared for me, the last piece of comfort I had in this world, was gone, and my world became a void of emptiness. In the days that followed, I returned to the nursing home, but something inside me had changed. The joy I had once found in the simple things faded, leaving a deep sense of loss. The friends I had made at the facility noticed the shift in my mood, but they didn't know how to help. They quietly stayed by my side, offering what comfort they could, but I was adrift in my grief. I realized, too late, that once you lose someone, you can never get them back. Ryan and Emily, sensing my deep sadness, began visiting me more often. My grandchildren came as well, hoping their laughter and smiles would bring me some comfort. But my heart remained closed off. I smiled for their sake, but it didn't reach my soul. The loneliness I had felt before was nothing compared to the emptiness I felt now. One afternoon, while sitting in the garden, Ryan noticed me staring off into space. He came over, sat beside me, and after a long pause, gently said, "Dad, please don't stay so sad. Misato wouldn't want to see you like this." I shook my head and sighed deeply. "Taro, you don't understand," I began, my voice quiet but filled with emotion. "It's not something you can just get over. Losing someone you love, especially in old age, feels like the very foundation of your world is crumbling. It's like half the sky has fallen on me. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Taro squeezed my hand, his grip comforting, yet I could still feel the weight of my grief. "Dad, we're here for you," he said softly. "Your grandchildren and I, we're here. We'll always be by your side." His words warmed my heart a little, but the emptiness inside me lingered, refusing to be filled. I nodded and managed a small smile. "I know, son. I'm grateful that you care about me. But this emptiness, it's something only I can truly feel." As I continued to walk in the garden one day, I noticed a new resident, an elderly man who looked lost and lonely. His eyes, filled with confusion and helplessness, reminded me of how I had felt when I first arrived. I walked over to him, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, and said, "Welcome to the facility. Would you like to take a walk with me?" He looked at me, nodded quietly, and we began walking together along the garden path. We didn't speak much, but it seemed like he could understand the unspoken weight of my thoughts. Sometimes, as elderly people, we feel incredibly isolated, but here we could at least share that quiet walk, that shared understanding of our situation. In some way, we were supporting each other, even if we didn't have the words to say it aloud. That night, as I lay in bed, Misato's memory filled my mind. Her voice, her smile, and her care for me became some of the most cherished memories of my life. Even though she was gone, her love and presence continued to provide me with strength. When I closed my eyes, the weight of loneliness no longer felt as overwhelming. Misato's death had brought deep sorrow into my life, but she had also taught me something invaluable: to cherish every human relationship we encounter. Whether family, friends, or even passing acquaintances, every bond is irreplaceable and deserves to be valued. The next morning, standing in the nursing home garden, I felt the warm sunlight pouring down on me. I realized that there may be nothing eternal in this world, but even a single moment of love, even a fleeting memory, can give us the strength to move forward. Those moments can be our guiding light in the darkest times. Today, I want to share something deeply meaningful to me, inspired by the words of Haruki Murakami. Many of us think that aging happens slowly, but in reality, time slips by unnoticed. Days turn into years, and before you know it, life itself has passed in a blink. One day, even if you feel young at heart, you'll look in the mirror and realize that the years have caught up with you. The first gray hairs appear, wrinkles start to form, and suddenly, time moves faster than you can grasp. As we age, we begin to hesitate even when mentioning our age, because there's a growing fear of how quickly time is passing. By the time we reach our 50s, we find ourselves wishing our aging parents could always be by our side, while realizing that we, too, are approaching old age. When someone calls you grandfather or grandmother, you may not even know how to respond. It's a moment of quiet realization that you've truly grown older. Some might try to deny it, saying, "But I'm still young," yet the moment those words leave your mouth, you might feel a deep sense of insecurity, as though they were just a form of self-comfort. As the years go by, people become quieter. It's not that they have nothing left to say, but they simply don't want to talk as much anymore. Among all the friends, colleagues, and acquaintances we've collected throughout our lives, how many of them truly understand us, really know our hearts? Everyone is busy with their own lives, and as we age, we find that there's almost no one we can truly confide in. When others don't understand, their comforting words can feel hollow, like an empty gesture. That's when we realize that it's better to be silent and reflect than to continue talking in circles. Because, in the end, the person who truly understands you is yourself. There are days when you don't even want to speak. In the quiet of the night, with your eyes closed, feeling your heartbeat, and simply being alone, you sometimes realize that being alone doesn't necessarily mean being lonely. You stop caring so much about what others think. Instead of being swayed by their opinions or judgments, it becomes more important to trust in your instincts and your understanding of the world. As time passes, people begin to develop a deeper sense of maturity. In youth, we're fearless and full of energy, confidence, and passion. But as we enter middle age, we start to understand that life doesn't always go the way we expect. Challenges and adversity become constant companions, and sometimes it feels like fate has us in its grip. No matter how hard we try, we come to realize that there are things in life we simply can't change. Even so, when you've given it your all, you reach a point where you can look back without regret. You learn to respect yourself and to appreciate the strengths you've developed. With this self-respect, humility naturally follows. Humility, I've come to learn, makes you a more respected person, not arrogance. As you look back, you realize how much you've changed over the years. So much so that sometimes it feels like you've lost sight of who you once were. But in the process of aging, your heart becomes stronger, and your experiences richer. The most significant change, though, is in how you understand love. I used to think that love meant holding hands and walking together forever, side by side until you grew old together. But now, I understand that many romantic relationships are fleeting. Sometimes staying together isn't as much about love as it is about necessity or habit. And so, life moves forward. Past, present, and future, they blur together, and we begin to question, who do we live for? Even when you search your memories, everything starts to fade and become hazy. With each passing year, the meaning of life becomes clearer. What you once couldn't accept, you now see as simply part of life. What once seemed so important no longer matters as much, and you learn to avoid the things that no longer bring you peace. That's just how it is. I shook my head, letting out a soft sigh. Ryan once told me, "Dad, it's not something you can just get over. You might not understand, but losing someone important in your old age feels like half the sky has fallen in on you." He held my hand tightly and said softly, "Dad, we're here for you. The kids and I will always be by your side." His words gave me a small comfort, but the emptiness I felt still didn't go away. I nodded, my voice quiet. "I know, son. I'm thankful that you care, but this emptiness, it's something only I can truly feel." One afternoon, while I was walking through the garden, I noticed a new resident who seemed a bit lost. His eyes were filled with confusion and a kind of helplessness, a look I knew all too well from when I first arrived at this place. I walked up to him and gently placed my hand on his shoulder. "Welcome to the facility. Would you like to take a walk with me?" He turned to look at me and nodded silently. We walked together along the garden path, not saying much. But it seemed like he could understand what I was feeling, as if he knew the weight of loneliness and what it was like to be lost in this stage of life. It's true, elderly people often feel isolated, but in this place, at least we could walk this journey together, supporting each other in the quiet moments of our lives. That night, as I lay in bed, thoughts of Nancy filled my mind. Her voice still echoed in my heart. Her smile, and the way she cared for me, became my most cherished memories. Even though she was no longer with me, the love she gave and her presence in my life continued to provide me with strength. When I closed my eyes, the weight of loneliness seemed less overwhelming. Losing Nancy was a deep sorrow, but she taught me something invaluable: to treasure every human connection, no matter how fleeting. Whether it's family, friends, or the people we meet along the way, every bond is irreplaceable. The next morning, standing in the garden of the nursing home, I felt the warmth of the sun on my face. It was a simple but profound moment, and I realized that while nothing in this world is eternal, a single moment of love or a cherished memory can carry us through even the darkest days. Those moments, like rays of sunlight, give us the strength to keep going. Now, I want to share something that resonates deeply with me, inspired by the words of Haruki Murakami. Many people think that aging happens slowly, but in truth, time slips by unnoticed. Days fade into years, and before we know it, life has passed by in the blink of an eye. Even if we feel young inside, There comes a day when we suddenly realize that our youth has slipped away. The first gray hairs appear, wrinkles slowly form, and we start to notice changes we never saw coming. As time moves forward, we grow older, and we start to hesitate when talking about our age. The passing of time becomes something we fear. We wish we could hold on to our parents forever, but instead, we find ourselves in our 50s, suddenly aware of how quickly time is passing. When someone calls you grandfather or grandmother, it can take you by surprise. You may not know how to respond at first, but eventually you accept it, realizing that aging has truly arrived. Some may say, "But I'm still young," but when those words leave your lips, you might feel a deep sense of uncertainty. You try to comfort yourself, but the moment those words are said, you might find your eyes filling with tears. As the years go by, people gradually become quieter. It's not because they have nothing to say, but because they've come to understand that not every thought needs to be shared. Among many friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, how many of them truly understand your heart? Everyone is busy with their own lives, and it becomes harder to find someone who can truly listen. When others don't understand, their comforting words can feel empty, almost superficial. You begin to realize that silence is often more meaningful than trying to explain everything. The one person who truly understands you is yourself. There are days when you don't even want to speak. In the quiet of the night, with your eyes closed and your heartbeat steady, you realize that being alone doesn't necessarily mean being lonely. You stop worrying about what others think. Instead of being swayed by the opinions of others, it becomes more important to trust in your judgment and personality. As time passes, you begin to develop a deeper understanding of life. In youth, we are fearless, full of confidence, and driven by passion. But as we age, we realize that life doesn't always go according to plan. Adversity follows us, and sometimes it feels like we're beaten down by fate. We can try our best, but sometimes we can't change the outcome. Even so, if we've given everything we have, we can rest easy knowing there is nothing left to regret. You learn to respect yourself and recognize the parts of you that are worthy of pride. But it's important not to let that turn into arrogance. Choosing humility makes you a more respected and admired person. Looking back, you realize how much you've changed. Sometimes, it feels like you've almost lost sight of who you once were. But as you age, your heart grows stronger, and your experiences become richer. The most significant change, however, is in how you understand love. I once believed that love meant holding hands and walking together forever, side by side until old age took its toll. But now, I understand that many relationships are temporary. The act of staying together isn't always born from love. Sometimes, it's simply a matter of habit. Life passes by, and the past, present, and future blur together. We question who we care for. When we look back, we see a trail of memories that have already started to fade. As the years accumulate, the meaning of life becomes clearer. What we couldn't accept before now seems ordinary. We no longer criticize what once troubled us. If we don't like something, we simply avoid it. That's all there is to it. Ryan said softly, "Dad, I know it's not something you can just get over. You might not fully understand yet, but when you suddenly lose someone important later in life, it feels like the sky has fallen in. Like half of everything you know has collapsed." He held my hand tightly, his voice steady but filled with care. "Dad, we're here for you. The kids and we're always here for you." His words warmed me a little, but the emptiness inside me still remained. I nodded slowly and replied, "I know, son. I'm grateful for you and the kids, but this emptiness, it's something only I can truly understand." One afternoon, while I was walking through the garden, I noticed a new resident, an elderly man who seemed lost in his thoughts, his eyes filled with confusion and helplessness. He reminded me of myself when I first arrived at this place, unsure of where I fit in. I walked over to him and gently placed my hand on his shoulder. "Welcome to the facility," I said with a soft smile. "Would you like to take a walk with me?" He looked up at me and nodded silently. Together, we walked down the garden path, side by side. We didn't speak much, but there was a quiet understanding between us, an unspoken connection. Elderly people often feel the weight of loneliness, but at least here, in this shared space, we could walk the final stretch of our journey together, offering silent support to one another. That night, as I lay in bed, Misato's image filled my mind. Her voice, her smile, and the care she had shown me became my most treasured memories. Even though she was no longer physically here, the love she had given me continued to provide me with strength. When I closed my eyes, the heaviness of loneliness no longer felt as unbearable. Misato's passing had left a deep void in my heart, but she had taught me something crucial: to cherish all the human relationships we encounter in life. Whether with family, friends, or even strangers, every bond is irreplaceable. The next morning, as I stood in the garden of the nursing home, I felt the warmth of the sunlight on my skin. There was peace in that moment, and I realized that though nothing in this world is eternal, even a fleeting moment of love and cherished memories can offer us the strength to carry on. These moments become our foundation when the world feels heavy. Now, I want to share with you a truth I've come to understand, inspired by the words of Haruki Murakami. Many of us think that aging is a slow process, but in reality, time slips away unnoticed. The days pass, years come and go, and before you know it, life itself has quietly moved on. Even if you feel young inside, one day, you suddenly realize that youth has passed you by. The first gray hairs appear, wrinkles start to form, and you see the evidence of time in your reflection. As the years pass, we grow older, and eventually, we hesitate even to mention our age. The fear of how quickly time passes begins to take hold. You reach a point when you realize that, just as your parents once weakened, you too are nearing that stage in life. When someone calls you grandfather or grandmother, it can catch you off guard. You may not know how to respond at first, but eventually, you have no choice but to accept it. Aging has arrived. Some might protest and say, "But I'm still young," but as those words leave your mouth, you may feel a loss of confidence. You realize that saying them is just a way to comfort yourself. But as soon as you finish speaking, you might find yourself on the verge of tears. As time passes, people become quieter. It's not that they have nothing left to say, but they no longer feel the need to speak as much. Among the many friends, colleagues, and acquaintances you've had over the years, how many of them truly understand your feelings? People are busy with their own lives, and it becomes harder to find someone to confide in. When others don't understand, their comforting words can feel hollow, almost like empty gestures. At some point, you realize that silence can often be more meaningful than talking endlessly. The person who truly understands you is yourself. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. There are days when you don't feel like speaking at all. In the quiet of the night, with your eyes closed, feeling the steady rhythm of your heartbeat, and simply spending time alone, you come to realize that being alone doesn't necessarily mean being lonely. You stop worrying so much about what others think or say. Instead of being swayed by their words, you learn to trust your instincts, your judgment, and the person you've become. As time goes by, we all develop a deeper, more mature understanding of life. When we're young, we're fearless and full of energy, confidence, and passion. But as we grow older, we begin to understand that life doesn't always unfold the way we expect. Challenges seem to follow us wherever we go, and sometimes it feels like we're beaten down by fate itself. You try your best, but eventually, you realize that not everything is within your control. Even so, when you've given everything you have, you come to the peaceful realization that you have no regrets. You learn to respect yourself and embrace the aspects of yourself you can be proud of. But with that self-respect comes humility. Choosing humility, rather than arrogance, makes you a person who is more respected by others. When you look back on your life, you see how much you've changed. So much so that sometimes it feels as though you've almost lost touch with who you once were. As you age, your heart becomes stronger, and your experiences richer. The most profound change, however, is in love. I used to think that love meant holding hands and walking together forever, side by side until your hair turned gray. But as the years have passed, I've come to realize that many romantic relationships are, in fact, temporary. Sometimes staying together isn't about love, but about habit or necessity. And so, life goes on, past, present, and future. They blur together, and you start to wonder, who truly exists for whom? Even when you search the depths of your memory, everything seems to fade and become hazy. As you accumulate years, the meaning of life becomes clearer. What you once couldn't accept or understand, you now see as commonplace, no longer feeling the need to criticize or judge it. If something no longer serves you, you simply walk away. That's all there is to it. One afternoon, while I was walking in the garden, I noticed a new resident who seemed lost in thought, his eyes filled with confusion and helplessness. He reminded me of myself when I first arrived here, uncertain of where I fit in. I walked over to him, gently placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, "Welcome to the facility. Would you like to take a walk with me?" He looked at me, nodded silently, and together, we began walking down the garden path. We didn't exchange many words, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. It seemed he could sense my feelings, too. Elderly people often feel isolated, and though the journey can be difficult, at least here, we could walk together, side by side, offering each other quiet support as we move through this final stage of life. As we reflect on the journey of aging, love, and the lessons life teaches us, I hope you found something in today's story that resonates with you. We've explored how relationships shape us, how we find strength in our memories, and how embracing loneliness doesn't have to mean living without connection. So, what have you learned from today's video? Is there a lesson that stood out to you, something you plan to carry forward in your own life? I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below sharing one thing you've learned and how you will bring it into your own life. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more meaningful conversations. Your support means a lot, and it helps us bring more valuable content your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.